Hello, class, and welcome to Lecture 4 on Mise en scène. This is Part 3, Composition. And composition has to do with the way that the various elements of the scene are arranged visually. So in many respects, a film shot resembles a painting, right? We know this because if we look at what our films are presented on, they're presented on flat screens, like a flat screen TV or your phone, right? They present a flat array of colors and shapes. So before we even start to read the image as three-dimensional, which is what film and television is trying to represent or give the illusion of, mise en scène offers many cues for guiding our attention and emphasizing elements in the frame. And here is a shot from The Thing from 1982, which I mentioned when we were talking about makeup in the first lecture in this lesson. And you can see just how carefully all of these elements have been arranged, right? You've got the hero in the middle third of the screen, looking down at this body, which is emphasized in the foreground, blood on the typewriter. So what is the filmmaker guiding our attention to? Well, mainly this gory scene, right? Because he foregrounds it right in the middle of the frame. And then all these other details are layered in around what's in the foreground and in the center, right? All these frozen things and busted up machines and stuff from this research station that's come under attack. So not only do you get a sense here how detailed frames are and how carefully arranged they are, like we talked about in the other lesson when we were looking at the shot from The Devil Wears Prada and Parasite, we also get a sense of how important it is for directors and filmmakers to arrange those elements so that our attention is guided. A balance is one of those elements. The film frame is a horizontal rectangle, sometimes a square, but mostly a horizontal rectangle. The director may sometimes try to balance the left and the right halves. So in this case, we have sort of balance in the scene, but the actor on the right is leaning forward just a little bit, and the actor on the left is leaning back. And so what is this meant to convey? It's meant to convey that the actor on the left, at least at this point in the film, has more power, right? He takes up a little bit more than his share of space. He's looking down on the other character. So the framing here and the balance is used, again, to express story and relationship between these characters. The filmmaker can also guide our attention by use of contrast and lighter color, right? We talked about that when we talked about lighting in the last lecture and looked at high contrast lighting in film noir, right? So that the different elements of the scene are made to pop and catch our attention. And our eyes are biased towards registering those differences and those changes. And so shots are always changing as the director guides our attention to what he or she wants us to see. Of course, movement, right? Obviously, we're talking about motion pictures here. And movement is the one resource that painting lacks. Our tendency to notice visual differences shifts into high gear when the image includes movement. And of course, movement can occur just via mise en scène, right? Because the actors can move around stage. But where movement really kicks into high gear is when it's done in relationship with cinematography, with a moving camera, for example. And we'll look at that in the next lesson. And then, of course, depth. As Boardwell and Thompson, one of your authors, writes, looking at a film image as two-dimensional helps us appreciate the artistry of the filmmakers, but it does require some effort because we find it easier to immediately see the edges and masses on the screen as three-dimensional space. And the elements of the image that creates this impression are called depth cues. So again, even though the screens are flat, right, the illusion is that we're looking through a window into three-dimensional space. And depth cues suggest that space has both volume and several distinct planes. Planes are the layers of space occupied by the persons or object. They're described according to how close or far away from the camera they are. Foreground, middle ground, background. And so here's an example from Citizen Kane, right? This is still a two-dimensional image, but three dimensions are suggested by placing the figures in different planes, right? Essentially by putting somebody way in the back so that they're smaller, somebody in the middle ground that seems about closer to us, but not quite in the foreground, and then we have the foreground figure. And again, as with the power dynamics that were registered in the shot we looked at from Barbershop, this is meant to convey an idea of who has power in the scene, right? The powerful Charles Foster Kane here, or his less powerful colleagues behind him. And that's how foreground and background works. It serves to draw our attention and to create a dynamic relation between the foreground and the background, right? So here in this shot, we have Tom Hanks as a gangster, right? And the foreground image is ironically contrasted by the background image because the foreground image is of him getting ready to, wreak violence on somebody. And the background is a religious painting, right? That's supposed to represent peace and mercy. So the tension there is highlighted through the contrast. Okay, so that's the end of our 3 lectures for mise en scène, and we will move forward to our next lesson, cinematography.